Alright, so think back to the first game you ever played that as soon as you hit the credits, all you could think was, damn. Now, imagine if that game was Metal Gear Solid 3. Now you know what it's like to be me because... damn. It's no secret that I love the Metal Gear franchise. And I think it's more common than most people think that most fans don't start with the very first game, probably because it was exclusive to the Japanese-only MSX for so long. Then again, most people consider Metal Gear Solid to be the first in the series, which many fans did start out with. But I, and many others, started out with what is usually considered to be the best game in the franchise, Metal Gear Solid 3. Now, I only played this one because at the time I was like, what, 12 or something? We had this friend of the family staying with us at the time, whom of which I hope is living a crappy life right now. I hated that guy. I was rummaging through his stuff because I was a dumb kid and I found a copy of Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater. I had heard of the Metal Gear Solid games before, so I had to play it, and let me tell you, that was an interesting experience. First time playing a stealth game, so obviously I wasn't that good. I didn't finish it, and given it wasn't my game, I had to return it before it was discovered to be missing. Kind of ironic now that I think about it. Later on, my mom got me the PS2 box set that came with the first 3 Metal Gear Solid games, and I remember playing the third one first out of those 3, which is something I didn't normally do. Since this was the newest edition of the game, it had all the quality of life improvements from the original version I played. This time around, I made it a point to see the game through to the end, and let me tell you, once I hit those credits, I was just like, damn. This game changed the way I looked at the video game medium as a whole. It blew me away. Metal Gear Solid 3, the 5th installment into the Metal Gear franchise, funny how that works out, is yet another endeavor by the video game industry's artsy uncle twice removed, Hideo Kojima. After the release of Metal Gear Solid 2, while it got high praise from critics, fan reaction was more mixed due to the game's more unconventional method of storytelling, mainly citing things such as Raiden being too different of a character than Snake, whom they thought they would be playing as, or the off-the-rails third act the game has as things that sort of held the game from being a perfect sequel to the highly regarded Metal Gear Solid. So when developing Metal Gear Solid 3, Kojima and his Kojima Productions team decided to change things up from the previous game. For one, we're back to playing as Snake, which fans were definitely happy to see. But instead of yet another big base to infiltrate, at least not until the end, Metal Gear Solid 3's environment would be the jungle, a setting completely foreign to the series so far. Don't bring up the NES game, okay? That doesn't count. This caused development to be a little more tricky since level designs would not only have to be different than previous games, but also have gameplay styles to accommodate the new setting. Kojima did state that he aimed for this third entry to be more realistic than the previous games, so the team had a lot of new ideas to try and work into the game, and that could not have been that easy. It probably didn't help that the development shifted from the upcoming PlayStation 3 back to the PlayStation 2 since the PS3 was taking a while to be released. But despite these setbacks, the team persevered, and Metal Gear Solid 3 was released on November 17, 2004 in the US, December 16, 2004 in Japan, and would be released in Europe and Australia in March 2005. That was the original version of the game subtitled Snake Eater. A revised version subtitled Subsistence would be released just about a year later in all regions. This version fixed a lot of glaring issues with the original title, like the fixed camera angle not working with the new level designs, and Subsistence also added a bunch of extra gameplay features, including the original Metal Gear and Metal Gear 2 from the MSX here in the West for the very first time. That and an online mode, which was sort of a precursor for the Metal Gear Solid 4 online mode. Later on, in 2011 and 2012, we got the Metal Gear Solid HD collection that featured Metal Gear Solid 2, 3, and Peace Walker, all in glorious HD for the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360.
And the Vita!
It gave Metal Gear Solid 3 a solid 60 frames per second, which is something the original PS2 version could not do, despite Metal Gear Solid 2 having a solid 60 FPS on the PS2. But hey, we got it on the, at the time, modern consoles, and it looks just awesome. This version of Metal Gear Solid 3 was the Subsistence version, with minor things removed like the online and the Ape Escape minigame? Okay, never play this version! One other version of Metal Gear Solid 3 was Metal Gear Solid Snake Eater 3D for the, you guessed it, it's the Vita again! I don't own this version of the game, but I did play it once on my friend's Nintendo 3DS, which is what it was released on. Sorry if my joke was misleading. I remember it being fun enough for what it was. You could create custom camo, which was cool, and the game ran fine enough. If I ever did find a copy of this, I definitely would like to give it another try. Because Sony absolutely refuses to get their shit together, I'm playing the Xbox 360 version of Metal Gear Solid 3 HD on my Xbox One through backwards compatibility. It looks so good here too. Absolutely crisp and runs flawlessly. Definitely the best place to play this game. I haven't played this game since 2016, so it's been about 6 years since I last went through Metal Gear Solid 3. But if there's one thing I was sure about going back in was that it would all come back to me as it went on, and let me tell you guys, when I hit start, all it took was for Snake's first line to hit.
After the end of World War II, the world was split into two, East and West. This marked the beginning of the era called the Cold War.
At the beginning of Metal Gear Solid 3, it's revealed that we're in the year 1964 in the midst of the Cold War. We're playing as a man named Jack, who quickly gets assigned the codename Naked Snake by his commander, who goes by Major Tom, one of many of the series' David Bowie references. Snake's mission is to infiltrate a small facility within Selinoyarsk, a Russian jungle, to retrieve Dr. Sokolov, whom of which previously defected to America, but was a bargaining chip America gave to the Soviet Union to end the Cuban Missile Crisis. The CIA retrieved information that Sokolov was working on a nuclear-equipped tank called the Shagohod, which could potentially be used if the Cold War were to turn to a nuclear war. So Snake infiltrates the jungle. After retrieving Sokolov and having a brief encounter with a man named Major Ocelot, Snake and Sokolov attempt to escape but are stopped by Snake's old mentor, a legendary American soldier named The Boss, who had taught Snake everything he knows. The Boss is there to announce her defection to the Soviet Union. Then she and her Cobra unit, this colorful boss lineup, kidnap Sokolov. A man named Colonel Volgin also makes an appearance, and is the Boss's cohort in her defection. The Boss gives Colonel Volgin 2 recoilless nuclear warheads, and shortly after she throws Snake off the bridge they are on before she and Colonel Volgin make their escape. Snake survives, but in the sky, Colonel Volgin, out of nowhere, decides to fire one of the nuclear warheads at Sokolov's research facility, essentially nuking his own country. I know it's a mini nuke, but damn, good thing Snake's used to being irradiated. This is all contained in the prologue chapter titled The Virtuous Mission. The real game begins after this. To sum it up, after the nuking of Sokolov's facility, the CIA's gunship that retrieved Snake showed up on Soviet radars. Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev contacts President Lyndon B. Johnson about this event. After President Johnson claims that the US had no involvement, Khrushchev speculates that Colonel Volgin may be involved, whom of which wishes to overthrow Khrushchev to turn the Cold War into a hot one. So Khrushchev makes a deal with President Johnson, which is what leads Snake to his major objectives for the game. To prove America's innocence, Snake must do the following. 1. Retrieve Sokolov to put a stop to Volgin's weapons development. 2. Destroy the Shagohod so the threat of nuclear war is at least slightly lowered. And 3. Assassinate the Boss, who is to be the scapegoat for America's innocence from firing the nuclear warhead. Snake is assisted by Major Tom, who returns to his original codename Major Zero. I actually really like how they managed to turn the David Bowie reference into a The Great Escape reference.
Did you ever see the movie The Great Escape? Came out last year.
Must have missed that one.
Paramedic, who was there during the Virtuous Mission and can not only save the game, but can give tips about the flora and fauna about the jungle and talk about movies and shit.
Hey Snake, you ever heard of Godzilla King of Monsters?
And Sigint, a weapons and technology expert who can give you info on all your gadgets and gear.
Is everyone but me that is hooked up with the Major Strange?
With all this in mind, Snake begins what is to be one of the biggest yet most secret missions in US history, Operation
Because you have to kill the boss and her Cobra unit, so it's like you're eating snakes.
Like I said previously, Kojima dropped the more avant-garde type storytelling and theming of Metal Gear Solid 2 in favor of something more straightforward. Sure, there's a lot more to it, but it's not that complex. It plays out more like a Hollywood action film more so than the previous games do. The major villain, Colonel Volgin, isn't complex, he's just an asshole. Snake is the charismatic hero who has an emotional tie within the missions, that being his connection to the boss, which gives him more depth than your cookie-cutter action hero. The game even has that sort of campy nature that you'd expect from an action flick. Sure, there's a lot of talk about loyalty to your nation and how times change people and places, but we also got fun action scenes, characters acting completely wild, and satisfying payoffs from the first act all the way to the third. And I mean, we still have the wacky Kojima-style characters as well, like a man who controls bees or an old guy photosynthesizing, but despite the far-fetched characters, they still manage to make the situation feel completely serious, or at least that of an action film. The characters themselves all may fit some role you'd see in some James Bond-esque spy flick, but the way they play with those roles are all fun, even if they aren't really doing anything really new with those roles. Snake, as I said, is your movie hero, but without the standard buff guy with gun trope to hold him down. He's a stealth agent, and due to his inexperience, he fails quite a lot in the game and has to figure his way out of a lot of interesting situations. He's also not afraid to talk things out with his peers or even crack a joke or two without it becoming Disney Marvel-esque levels of trailer bait humor.
Don't suppose you could let me out of here?
Huh? I can't do that.
On the other side, we have Colonel Volgin with zero redeeming qualities and is simply there to be a common bad guy for everyone to dislike, and they have so much fun making him unlikable. The lightning powers add to this, not just because of how it channels Star Wars, but it gives Volgin something to make him more threatening without the big robot, and not to mention make him look way more evil. Eva, whom of which Snake meets early on, is your standard femme fatale that you'd see in any spy flick, but instead of her simply being a Bond girl, she herself is more like her own James Bond within the story, playing double agent, saving Snake on multiple occasions, and having her own arsenal of gadgets she uses. She does slip back into the Bond girl type role when it comes to her relationship with Snake, but it comes off more as mutual relying on each other rather than Eva having to let Snake save the day all the time.
Hey,
What?
you're gonna get wet again.
Major Ocelot is probably my favorite character simply because he's just adorable in this game. After getting his ass kicked by Snake early on, he sort of pins himself as Snake's rival throughout the game, but it's clear he just wants to impress Snake. He does grow more skilled as the game goes on, and he does come to more equal grounds with Snake by the end. Though he's clearly a big fanboy of Snake, and knowing later context of the Metal Gear series, it's easy to see why they did this.
Twice now you've made me taste bitter defeat.
And of course, the strongest character, and who I'd consider to be one of the best female characters in any game ever, the boss. She isn't simply the mysterious mentor gone rogue who speaks cryptically and has her own agenda from the main villain. No, the boss gets her hands dirty, constantly making a fool of Snake and trouncing over him on almost every encounter they have.
What is this fairy disguise?
And the phrase she uses, loyalty to the end, is the best way to describe her. She follows her ideals through and through, sacrificing all she has for her mission. The boss's ideology is what the main theming of Metal Gear Solid 3 is. It's focused on the times and how that impacts aspects of our lives. War, patriotism, xenophobia, ideologies. The themes explored here are less this is how we could be affected like what Metal Gear Solid 2 does, and more goes for this is how we have been affected and what that does to us. Despite its campy spy flick exterior, Metal Gear Solid 3's message is more relatable because of how it comes down to how one personally thinks about all these things. And that's why the boss is so interesting to players. Her stance, loyalty to the end, is an extreme we all claim to have, but only a few can actually see it through. And the game is Snake having to decide if he can follow suit. In the same way Major Ocelot is improving to prove himself to Snake, Snake has to work up the courage to do what must be done, i.e. assassinate the boss, in order to prove himself to the boss and to his own country.
The foibles of politics and a march of time can turn friends into enemies just as easily as the wind changes. Ridiculous, isn't it?
These themes are probably some of the strongest in the series because they don't really have the baggage of the prequel games to worry about. This is the earliest in the timeline, so it can really say whatever it wants to as long as it doesn't, you know, cause a time paradox.
Snake, what have you done? You changed the future! You've created a time paradox!
But anytime Kojima tried to bring these types of themes up again, it sort of fell flat, and I personally think it's because the setup and characters of Metal Gear Solid 3 are the strongest in the series. Metal Gear Solid 3's themes, much like the rest of the games in the series, are also reinforced through its gameplay. Naturally, the whole overarching series has a strong anti-war message, so stealth being the main form of gameplay is a natural showcase of that. But in Metal Gear Solid 3, the strong theming of nationalism and adapting to the times can be interpreted through having to adapt to one's environment through camouflage. Metal Gear Solid 3's main mechanic is being able to swap out different camouflages for both your face and your clothes. You can see the camo index meters show how well you adapt to your current environment. It will change depending on movement, lighting, and of course any sort of change in the environment. There's a ton of different types of camo you can obtain either by simply finding them in the wild or meeting certain conditions. And a lot of the different types of camo have unique abilities that activate when you wear them, such as your batteries never draining, no handshaking, or even making the enemy think you're on their side for a second. A little reinforcement of that theming of nationalism. I've always been a sucker for alternate costumes in games too, so this mechanic naturally speaks to me. Though I've never been able to get that frog camo you get for shooting all these little frog statues scattered throughout the game. Which, in the 3DS version, are swapped to Yoshis. While the camo mechanic can reinforce that theming of adapting to the times, the gigantic lexicon of weapons and gadgets you get reinforce that you are in fact playing as James Bond. No more are the one-use items from Metal Gear Solid 2. Now everything you pick up has, well, one use, but they're more useful throughout the whole game instead of just once. Of course, there are various weapons at your disposal that you procure during your playthrough, most of which are lethal, so for the no-kill runs we all like to do, you'll more than likely stick the tranquilizer gun, which almost breaks the game. Now suppressors degrade and eventually break in an attempt to balance the game, so sloppy use of the tranq gun does result in situations where the gun is almost useless if you don't want to be spotted, but once you get a few suppressors, much like Metal Gear Solid 2, the game can be tackled relatively easy with this gun. It doesn't make the game a cakewalk though, and honestly most of the other weapons are machine guns with no suppressor option, so they're only really useful during boss battles, which can also be done with just the tranq gun, or if you've been caught and aren't doing a no-kill run and feel like committing mass murder. Every other gadget you get has more practical uses. Since there's no radar in this game, you have to utilize the map and compass to find your way through the jungle, though it's usually pretty clear where you have to go, save for a few cases where there's multiple optional areas to go. And locating enemies? Well, you either observe your surroundings so they don't sneak up on you, or utilize certain battery-operated gadgets like the sonar that will simply locate movement. Animals and enemies alike, however, so it's only really useful to a point. Finally, we have the miscellaneous category where we find gadgets that are unique, like the croc cap. Makes you look like a crocodile in the water. Or the cigar spray, a very James Bond type gadget that can knock out anyone who gets sprayed by it. But of course, the #1 staple of the Metal Gear series is the classic box item.
Snake, what are you doing?
I'm in a box.
A cardboard box? Why are you...
I don't know, I was just looking at it and Suddenly I got this irresistible urge to get inside. No, not just an urge. More than that, it was my destiny to be here. In the box.
Destiny?
Yeah. And then when I put it on, I suddenly got this feeling of inner peace. I can't put it into words. I feel safe. Like this is where I was meant to be. Like I'd found the key to true happiness.
Uh-huh.
Does any of that make sense?
Not even a little.
You should come inside the box. Then you'll know what I mean.
Man, I don't want to know what you mean.
When all else fails, though, you do have a new set of tools at your disposal called Them Hands. Close Quarters Combat, also known as CQC, is your hand-to-hand combat in this game that goes beyond the previous game's single combo you can perform. Now you can not only do that, but grapple the enemies and slam them to the ground or use this as a means to interrogate them. Getting good with CQC may not seem required, but trust me, it can help you out in a pinch. There's a wide variety as to what kind of style of game you can play here. Maybe you want to hide in plain sight and focus on keeping your camo index as high as possible. Maybe you want to utilize each gadget to their fullest and constantly trick the enemy as you pass them. Maybe you want to murder everyone violently. The options are limitless. The AI in this game is even more advanced than Metal Gear Solid 2's AI. Of course, there's a lot less conversing between enemies, but they react differently to their environment depending on what Snake is wearing. Not to mention that they're a lot harder to keep track of in this game due to their outfits also being well camouflaged with the environments. The same can be said about the bosses. They too have mechanics where they can lose Snake, fall for traps, or even hide from you if they are the type to do so. There are mostly traditional bosses in the game where it's all about waiting for a weak point or using a gadget to open up said weak point. Very well designed and fun, mind you, and in my opinion are the best in the series. But a few of the bosses operate on this gameplay style of camouflage and gadget use. Namely the bosses The End and the final boss fight against the boss. More so on the inside of things, you have to use every mechanic in the game to find this guy, using as many tricks as you can, especially if you try to sneak up on him.
Freeze. How did you?
Kojima originally wanted this fight to last a full, literal week. A little far-fetched, but hey, you can just turn the system clock forward and let the End die of old age. Or just snipe him when you have the chance to early on. The boss, on the other hand, well, now you're just fighting Snake. She can use CQC against you, which you can counter, but it's kind of hard to do so sometimes. She blends in with the beautiful surroundings and has her trademark gun, the Patriot, she uses against you. She will even hide and try to get the jump on you. Probably one of the best designed boss fights in the series. The part that makes this fight for me, though, is how it starts silent. And as the 10-minute time limit goes down, we slowly get that amazing theme song introduced and sets the mood perfectly. The music in this game is top freaking notch. And I'm not just talking about the theme song Snake Eater, which is one of the best songs in gaming history. Oh yeah, the vocalist for that track is Cynthia Harrell, and she also did
just like the wind I've always been.
Anyways, aside from Snake Eater, Harry Gregson Williams and Norihiko Hibino, he made Snake Eater by the way, who had previously worked on Metal Gear Solid 2, went all out making this perfect jungle sneaking symphony. They also perfected the intense action scenes and boss fight themes. They reinforced the game's theming, genre, pays homages to spy flicks, even the Metal Gear series as a whole. This soundtrack is what legends are made out of. It is literally near perfect. I'll be honest, I've been trying really hard to come up with any sort of issues the game has, but I got nothing. Some would say the cutscenes and codec calls go on too long, but come on, it wouldn't be a Metal Gear game without those, and besides, they're entertaining as hell. So yeah, shocker, one of the greatest games of all time, and I can't find anything wrong with it. It still looks great, it plays like a dream, it has loads of content and Easter eggs, it doesn't overstay its welcome, it has an amazing soundtrack, awesome story, and goddamn, this is probably the greatest game of all time. I guess it just took a long break away from playing it, but now that I've played it again, I can see why it stood out to me back when I first played it. I recommend this game to everyone who loves well-made video games, especially if you view them on the same level as others view film. Like I said, this is one of those times when owning an Xbox is worthwhile because due to backwards compatibility, you can get this game on the Xbox One or Series X. There are a slew of other consoles you can get Metal Gear Solid 3 on if you still have any of them, so there are options. But really, this game should be readily available on everything because this is one of, if not the greatest game of all time. Despite its lasting legacy within the Metal Gear fanbase, Metal Gear Solid 3 did not do as well as its predecessor. It did get very favorable reviews from review sites upon release, and its impact on the Metal Gear series is clear by its sequels. Every Metal Gear game from here on references all the previous games for sure, but the Metal Gear Solid 3 references and callbacks are plentiful. Camo mechanics and CQC are in every game now. The boss's gun, the Patriot, is usually available in some way as well. And of course, if there's any sort of music player, you know that Snake Eater will be in there. Metal Gear Solid 3 has gone down as the best Metal Gear game, so why on earth is this game not available on everything ever? Porting over the HD collection, including 2 and Peace Walker alongside it, would be an easy bestseller for Konami. Now, in terms of Metal Gear Solid 3 getting a remake, while I wouldn't say that would be completely necessary, I also would be interested in how they would go about that. Obviously, utilizing Metal Gear Solid 5's Fox engine would make sense, and seeing this game with modern-day graphical fidelity with ray tracing and whatnot would definitely give this game the look it deserves. The only thing that would take away from it would be the game's unique look that you only really got from games from the PS2 era. But I'm sure with the right people on the job, they could bring that look forward with a new light. And for a minute there was hope within the fanbase. Back in 2016, we saw Fox Engine remade cutscenes for Metal Gear Solid 3, and they looked so fucking good, like holy shit, Konami's answering our prayers, we're getting a Metal Gear Solid 3 remake!
Oh, it was for a Apache slot machine. Thank you, Konami.